So about a month ago, I woke up to a text from my friend saying, "Morning, I just got my bleed a week early. I need you to explain that to me." And this kind of thing happens actually often to me, and it's sort of comical because most of the time people think that there's going to be a simple answer, or like there's like a quick thing for me to say, but more often than not, for me to explain or understand anything, I have to ask you 5 million follow-up questions. So I'll spare you all of the follow-up questions I went through with this particular friend. But basically the question that got her was me saying, "Well, when did you ovulate?" And she responded, "Ugh, I need to start taking my temp. Haha." So side note, this is kind of the hill I'll die on too, is that your apps cannot predict your ovulation. Ovulation cannot be predicted. You're not a robot. It's like most people I talk to, and maybe if you're listening, you know this, but I have to say it in case someone doesn't. An app like, I think this particular friend used an app called Stardust, and I know that app is really cute. It like talks about your cycle with the moon, but it will just say like, "Oh, you're probably ovulating today." But if you're not inputting temperatures, if you're not tracking when your temperature spikes, you don't know that that is actually when you're ovulating, because ovulation can be impacted by stress, by poor sleep, by travel, by illness. And also, even if you're tracking your cervical fluid in and of itself does not tell you that you're ovulating or that you ovulated. Cervical fluid just tells you that you might ovulate. You have to take your basal body temperature in order to track ovulation. It'll spike the day after you ovulate. And your period's never actually late. Your period will come in a certain amount of time after you ovulate. It's a fixed amount of time. The luteal phase is pretty much going to be like 10 to 14 days. Ideally, it's like 12 to 14. And by the way, Moon Cycle Mastery, or actually I've renamed it Menstrual Cycle Mastery, my course is the perfect place to get into all of this if you're confused about your cycle length, your ovulation, because not only is this the protocol that I created in the course to help restore regular ovulation, but it also teaches you how to know for sure when you did ovulate, if you ovulated, and what to do about it if you're not. So you can always check that out in the show notes as well. It's a great place for you. Now, I don't know for sure what happened with my friend, but her period coming a week early, and I'm putting that in air quotes if you're only listening to audio, because again, your period's not going to come early, probably means that she had a withdrawal bleed and she did not actually ovulate. That's because only ovulation gives you a bleed, which is why you want to support ovulation to occur, not your bleed to come on. Welcome to the Moon Baby Magic Podcast, a space for women and women's stories. For the woman just beginning to believe she can actually heal her painful period naturally. For the one in a full-on love affair with aligning her entire life with her cycle. And for every woman in between. This is a platform to remember the wisdom that lives in our wombs so that we may actualize the lives of our dreams. I'm your host, Natalie Elliott, women's health practitioner specializing in traditional Chinese medicine-based hormonal healing. Ready for slow and sacred storytelling and to learn a little something? Let's dive in. All right, so welcome women to the show. I wanted to record this episode today because it's literally like the most common question I get from friends, random people on Instagram, even clients, people saying, like my friend said before, "Natalie, why is my period late? How do I bring on my stuck bleed? I think I might not be ovulating." I've had clients come to me, or women in my membership, the Cyclical Living Circle, be like, "Natalie, how do I know? I think I might not be ovulating." And this is so personal to me too, because it's actually partly how I even got into any of this work myself. If you haven't listened to, I believe in my food story episode, which was last season, Nourishment as Root Level Healing, I believe that one is called. That talks about, my chapter of veganism, and basically sparing you all the details of that chapter as well. When I first started tracking my cycle, because I knew something was wrong, I was having like 40 plus day cycles. Unlike my friend, I had these long cycles. My period I always thought was late. My cycle was super irregular. I was using that Stardust app as well, not tracking temperatures or anything like that. And so I started working with a fertility awareness method educator. I did one-on-one sessions, and I realized, well, she helped me realize that I was not ovulating at all. And I could tell that based on the up and downs in my temperature and no consistent rise, and then a steady staying of the rise. And I'll get into signs you might not be ovulating later in this episode, but just to share with you a little bit about where I'm coming from. And so some of you might be listening and thinking, well, Natalie, I'm not trying to conceive right now. I don't really care if I'm ovulating or not. But it actually, ovulation really matters, even if you're not going to conceive. Because, and let me explain this to you. We've already talked about how in order to have a period, you have to have ovulation. Ovulation matters because the empty egg sac that's created by ovulation, so that follicle breaks free through the egg sac. That sac, once it's emptied of the follicle, is going to become the corpus luteum, aka the temporary endocrine gland that your body uses to secrete progesterone. So progesterone is literally what gives your body the capacity to conceive. It's progestation. But even if you're not currently trying to conceive, you should know that lack of progesterone is what leads to PMS symptoms like emotional fragility, headaches, bloating, breast tenderness, and more. And also, if you don't ovulate, you don't get a period. So if your period is missing, this is for you too. And I had a client who fits exactly that case that I want to tell you about in just a minute. But I want you to know that if your cycle feels like a constant mystery to you, like you're never quite sure when you're going to bleed, or maybe you have a shorter or a longer cycle than normal, I know how stressful that is. I've had it myself. I've seen it in clients. You feel out of sorts. It feels almost as though you don't know where you are in time and space, because whether you're super aware of it or not, as women, we really track time with our cycle, not just the clock, not just the calendar. It's also our menstrual cycle. You want to know when you're going to bleed so that it doesn't sneak up on you and you're unprepared. You want to be able to prepare to rest when you bleed, ideally. And you probably want to know that you ovulated to know that your body is healthy and capable of conceiving, even if that's not the focus right now. Okay, so I want to tell you about this client of mine. So she came to me after losing her period for 7 years. 7 years, women. She'd had 1 or 2 bleeds in all of that time, and the last one had been 4 months before we started working together. So she'd lost it for 7 years, and then she'd gotten it back kind of sporadically, and had a bleed 4 months before we started working together. When she came to me, she had no cervical fluid, which we're going to get into in this episode as well, no temperature shift, no signs of ovulation whatsoever. And then within 2 months of working together, using the exact protocol that I teach in both my one-on-one practice, but also in menstrual cycle mastery, her period came back. 2 months after working together. And it came back with cervical fluid she had genuinely never noticed in her life before that, super fertile quality. She was so surprised. She said to me, and this is a quote, "I think I only worked with you for 2 months when my beautiful moon showed herself again." She's using the word moon in place of period because she had really connected with this more mystical element of her cycle as well, which was part of the journey and is always part of the work I do as well. And that's what restoring ovulation looks like. So today I want to help you understand if that's something your body needs too. Just take a little sip of my coffee. All right, so now that you know that ovulation matters, now you know why it matters, let's get into the signs that you might not actually be ovulating regularly. So the first one is kind of the most obvious. It's that missing or very irregular periods. If your cycle is longer than 35 days or wildly inconsistent month to month, ovulation likely isn't happening reliably, because remember, if you ovulate, you are going to get a period about 2 weeks later. And it is possible to ovulate late. I do have some clients who I'm working with right now where we're working on making ovulation happen sooner. And that sometimes they will ovulate in day 30 or something like that, and then have a period 2 weeks later. But ideally, you want to ovulate earlier in your cycle, not necessarily always on exactly day 14. You're not a robot, but earlier in your cycle means you have less exposure to estrogen, and so less of a chance of getting those estrogen dominant symptoms, which can lead to PMS as well. The second sign, your luteal phase is very short. less than 9 days. So some of these signs also are an indication that even if you did ovulate, like you could have an irregular period or a short luteal phase and still have ovulated, but it wasn't a very strong ovulation. So a luteal phase shorter than 9 days, there's going to be a weak ovulation because progesterone is what allows the luteal phase to be nice and long, and you want a long luteal phase because, again, you're getting exposure to progesterone, and that's a good thing. Progesterone is actually like anti-inflammatory. It protects your heart and your brain. It soothes your nervous system. It's so good for you. So I know there's all this talk online around how much the luteal phase sucks, but you do want a long luteal phase. So a weak ovulation, obviously, because ovulation is going to be what then creates the progesterone. Remember, we talked about that empty egg sac. A weak ovulation is going to lead to a weak luteal phase. So a luteal phase shorter than 9 days. And you'll be able to know how long your luteal phase is based on tracking your ovulation. And again, you can find all of that information as well as how to restore regular ovulation and menstrual cycle mastery. The third sign is that you don't have any mid-cycle cervical fluid. So if you're not noticing any cervical fluid, you might not be ovulating because cervical fluid is a sign that your cervix is opening up, softening, and preparing to ovulate. The cervical fluid is what is going to like be able to hold the sperm in if you're trying to conceive. So if you're not noticing that, probably a sign that you're either not ovulating or there's, in traditional Chinese medicine, we'd call it a bit of a yin deficiency, that you're not noticing that cervical fluid and you'd want to boost your yin. The fourth sign is that your basal body temperature never rises or there's not a clear temperature shift. This is what my chart looked like when I first started tracking and when I was recovering from a vegan diet that really depleted me. And it just looked like a lot of ups and downs, like kind of crazy, like there wasn't a clear pattern. If you're ovulating, you'll have a clear first phase of the cycle with lower temperatures and second phase of the cycle with higher temperatures. Okay. The fifth sign is that your PMS is really bad. Remember that luteal phase is characterized by progesterone. So this one surprises people, but PMS is largely a progesterone issue. And you only make progesterone after ovulation. So if your PMS is severe, probably your progesterone is low, which often means that ovulation didn't happen or, again, it was a weak ovulation. And everything we're talking about is going to support you in a restoring robust ovulation as well. The sixth sign, and the final one I'll share here, is light or short periods. So less than 3 days, depending. I mean, if you have like a 2-day flow and it's a good amount of blood and it's red blood, not pink, then that's probably fine. But you really want to think about compared to what's normal for you. So if you think maybe you have an anovulatory cycle, meaning you didn't ovulate in that cycle, you might notice your period's a little different. I had 2 anovulatory cycles when I was traveling last summer. And what I noticed is like I did get this like kind of withdrawal, breakthrough bleed, whatever you want to call it. But it was weird. It was like light and it just didn't really seem, it was just different, you know? And so you'll notice it. It's different. And that's just because it means your uterine lining never properly built up. So again, of course, some of these can also indicate a weak ovulation. And in that case, you still want to support a robust ovulation so that you can have ample progesterone for a PMS and pain-free period, which is what I want for all of you. That is just the baseline. So now you might be thinking, like, why is any of this even happening? And so my baseline here is your body's always doing things intelligently. So if we think like ovulation can be suppressed due to poor sleep, due to stress, perhaps travel, switching time zones, and illness, none of those are optimal conditions to conceive a baby in. So if your body, again, even if you're not trying to actively conceive right now, that is the sort of function of your female physiology. And so if you're sick, if there's like stress and your body's perceiving it's not a safe condition to reproduce in, let's suppress ovulation, like, right? Good job, body. If we think about what Western medicine says about lack of ovulation or irregular ovulation, sometimes there's a component of PCOS, of an underlying thyroid issue like hypothyroidism or Hashimoto's. I just had a really great masterclass on that has been very popular. So I'll link that in the show notes as well. And you can check that out if you have a thyroid issue. It dives into all of the root causes based on a traditional Chinese medicine approach. And we're going to get into some of those here as well. and what kind of your step-by-step plan to heal the root causes of thyroid issues. There's also a podcast episode on that if you want to learn more. And sometimes low body weight and stress can also contribute to these anovulatory cycles. And while those things are real, they're still just labels. They don't tell you why your body made that decision or what to do about it at the root. So in traditional Chinese medicine, which is the lens I love to look at for women's health and what I use in all of my programs, there's 3 main patterns underneath lack of ovulation or anovulation, and usually they kind of overlap. So the first one I want to talk about is kidney yang deficiency. So I want you to think of kidney yang as your body's pilot light. So think about like when you light a furnace. Maybe this is kind of niche, but I live in like an older house. And so you light the furnace for the winter and it sort of stays lit. So when you turn the little thing to get the heat to go on, clearly I'm not super knowledgeable about this. The pilot light is what lets it burn. It's that. So your kidney yang is like your deep metabolic fire that powers everything in your body, including your reproductive system. And so when that fire is low, your body doesn't have the energetic resources to push an egg to ovulation. So classic signs of kidney yang deficiency, and if you have a thyroid condition, this is going to sound quite familiar. Always cold, especially your hands and feet, achy low back, maybe achy knees, low libido, fatigue that sleep doesn't fix, long cycles, long irregular cycles. In TCM, traditional Chinese medicine, thyroid conditions are pretty much always understood as having an underlying kidney yang deficiency. The next pattern I'll share about is liver qi stagnation. And I also have an entire episode on the liver, so you can go back and check that out if this resonates. But your liver in traditional Chinese medicine is responsible for the smooth flow of qi and blood throughout your body. So including the energy surge that's required to actually release an egg. When we think about going from follicular to luteal, which is ovulation, you can think of like the liver sort of has to metabolize the estrogen to then create the LH surge to create ovulation. And that is, when that doesn't happen, that is the liver qi stagnating. You can just think of qi as like energy almost. So when liver qi is stuck, like I said, that surge can't happen properly or it happens very weakly. So classic signs of underlying liver qi stagnation that you might also notice are PMS, irritability, breast tenderness, really like all of those PMS symptoms. Again, irregular cycles, sort of wired but tired feeling more than lethargy. And stress is the number one cause of liver qi stagnation, which is why a stressful month can delay your ovulation by a day or even weeks, and why your app is not a good predictor without you inputting your actual data in there. Even if you're like, oh, I pretty much always ovulate on this day, a stressful month can throw you off. Okay, the last one I'll talk about here is spleen qi deficiency. So in traditional Chinese medicine, your spleen governs digestion and the transformation of food into blood and energy. So blood and qi again. If your spleen is weak, your body isn't building enough of the raw material it needs to support ovulation. So specifically the blood and the nutrients required to grow a follicle. Classic signs of spleen qi deficiency you might notice are bloating, loose stools, fatigue after eating, sugar cravings. So blood sugar is a really big thing, and we're going to get into that in a minute. And overthinking. It's such a big one for the spleen, overthinking. This is also, again, why blood sugar is so foundational, because it's essentially supporting your spleen qi in sort of more of a Western understanding. So let's get into that, the practical. What do you actually do about this? I'm going to give you a couple tangible starting points. First, start tracking your cycle with a basal body temperature thermometer. You can get one on Amazon. They're like $12. You just take it in the morning. You do need to take it sort of before you get up or do anything. So if that's hard for you, like if you're breastfeeding, if you're up and out throughout the night, if you don't wake up at regular times, I do really like the temp drop. And I have an affiliate code. I believe it's AF Moon Baby Magic. But I'll put it in the show notes for the temp drop. And that'll get you 10 or 15% off. And if you're not using the temp drop and you're just using a basal body temperature thermometer, you can use an app called Read Your Body to input your data yourself. And you want to track consistently for about 3 months. You're looking for that temperature shift. And again, Moon Cycle Mastery, Menstrual Cycle Mastery, keep forgetting that I've changed the name to make it clearer, walks you through exactly how to do this. Second, if you're noticing any of the signs we talked about and not seeing a temperature rise after you track for about 3 months, the very first thing I want you to do is begin regulating your blood sugar. Your ovaries literally have insulin receptors, so they are that sensitive to what you eat and when. Start with breakfast within an hour of waking up with protein and eat every 3 to 4 hours after that. It sounds simple, but I promise you, if you're not doing it, it will change things for you. If you want to go deeper and you feel like you're doing this and your blood sugar is still a bit unstable, like you still have anxiety, energy crashes, irregular ovulation, painful periods, a glucometer to track your blood sugar and see how different things are affecting you in real time is worth looking into. And the supplement inositol is also worth looking into as supplemental support. Okay, the last and third thing I'll give you here, or the third thing, not the last, is your light environment matters more than you might realize. So I've probably talked about this on this podcast a million times. And I even get comments when I share about this on Instagram, like, that's too simple. But it's not, I promise you. I actually was just speaking with a client who started wearing red light glasses at night to block blue light at night. And like prioritizing getting up and seeing the morning sun before looking at any screens. And she's like, wow, I cannot believe how much this has changed things for me. Those deeper level changes like ovulation take a few months, but within weeks, within days even, you start to notice better sleep and better energy. And that's because blue light at night or scrolling before you see morning sunlight spikes cortisol, disrupts your circadian rhythm, and yes, even suppresses ovulation. So morning sun first, screens come later, and your nervous system will thank you too. And the last thing I'll say here, and I've mentioned it a few times throughout this episode because I really do believe in it that much, is join Menstrual Cycle Mastery. This is the full protocol. Every single video, every single practice included in the step-by-step process I've created to getting you to regular and pain-free cycles is designed to restore regular ovulation so that you can enjoy pain and PMS-free periods. The tracking, the food, the supplements, the nervous system piece, it's all of it in one place. So you can find the link to that in the show notes. And what I'll leave you with here, something that has always stuck with me that I heard from someone, and I wish I could remember who it was, on Instagram at the beginning of my journey, like 6 years ago. And she said, ovulation is the main event of the cycle, not your period. And even as a girly who loves her period, I have to agree, because there is no period without ovulation. No conception without ovulation. And so if your ovulation is missing or less than optimal, please remember that your body has not forgotten how to do it. Your body's not broken. Your body is just needing the right conditions. So go create them. Thank you for tuning in to the wisdom of the womb today. It's truly such an honor to bring these stories and teachings forward to you, and it would mean so much to me if you'd rate and review this podcast so that it can reach more women. If you're looking for deeper support, you can always find the link to join our online community, the Cyclical Living Circle with the best women in the world, in the show notes, and you'll also find the links to book one-on-one virtual sessions for your specific needs, as well as any workshops or courses I'm currently offering. Plus, you can follow me on Instagram, and I love to connect with you all there. All right, see you next week.